The bass guitar is a stringed instrument played primarily with the fingers, a thumb, by plucking, slapping, popping, strumming, tapping, thumping, or picking with a plectrum, often known as a pick. The bass guitar is similar in appearance and construction to an electric guitar, but with a longer neck and scale length, and 4 to 6 strings are courses. The 4-string bass, by far the most common, is usually tuned the same as the double bass, which corresponds to pitches 1 octave lower than the 4 lowest pitched strings of a guitar. The bass guitar is a transposing instrument, as it is notated in bass clef an octave higher than it sounds to avoid excessive ledger lines. Like the electric guitar, the bass guitar has pickups and it is plugged into an amplifier and speaker for live performances. Since the 1960s, the bass guitar has largely replaced the double bass in popular music as the bass instrument in the rhythm section. While types of bass lines vary widely from one style of music to another, the bassist usually fulfills a similar role, anchoring the harmonic framework and establishing the beat. Many styles of music utilize the bass guitar, including rock, metal, pop, punk rock, country, reggae, gospel, blues, symphonic rock, and jazz. It is often a solo instrument in jazz, jazz fusion, Latin, funk, progressive rock and other rock and metal styles. History: 1930s–1940s. In the 1930s, musician and inventor Paul Tutmarc from Seattle, Washington, who was manufacturing lap steel guitars, developed the first electric string bass in its modern form, a fretted instrument designed to be played horizontally. The 1935 sales catalog for Tutmarc's electronic musical instrument company, Audiovox, featured his Model 736 bass fiddle, a 4-stringed, solid-bodied, fretted electric bass instrument with a 30.5-inch scale length. The adoption of air guitar form made the instrument easier to hold and transport than any of the existing stringed bass instruments. The addition of frets enabled bassists to play in tune more easily than on acoustic or electric upright basses. Around 100 of these instruments were made during this period. Around 1947, Tutmarc's son, Bud, began marketing a similar bass under the Serenader brand name, prominently advertised in the nationally distributed L.D. Keeter Music Company wholesale job catalog of 48. However, the Tutmarc family inventions did not achieve market success. 1950s. In the 1950s, Leo Fender, with the help of his employee George Fullerton, developed the first mass-produced electric bass, his Fender Precision bass, which began production in October 1951, became a widely copied industry standard. The Precision bass evolved from a simple, uncontoured, slab body design and a single coil pickup similar to that of a Telecaster to a contoured body design with beveled edges for comfort, and a split single coil pickup with 4 poles on each half, 2 poles for each string. This split pickup, introduced in 1957, appears to have been 2 mandolin pickups. The pole pieces and leads of the coils were reversed with respect to each other, producing a humbucking effect. Humbucking is a design that electrically cancels the effect of any AC hum. The Fender bass was a revolutionary new instrument, which could be easily transported to a gig, and amplified to just about any volume without feeding back. The upright basses that had previously been used in jazz and early rock and roll were hard to amplify and they were prone to causing unwanted audio feedback when plugged into a bass amplifier. Monk Montgomery was the first bass player to tour with the Fender bass guitar, with Lionel Hampton's post-war big band in 1953. Roy Johnson, and Shifty Henry with Louis Jordan and Amp, his Timpani 5, were other early Fender bass pioneers. Bill Black, playing with Elvis Presley, switched from upright bass to the Fender Precision bass around 1957. The bass guitar was intended to appeal to guitarists as well as upright bass players, and many early pioneers of the instrument, such as Carol Kaye and Joe Osborne, were originally guitarists. Following Fender's lead, in 1953, Gibson released the first short-scale violin-shaped electric bass with extendable end pin, allowing it to be played upright or horizontally. Gibson renamed the electric bass in 1958 to the EB-1. Also in 1958, Gibson released the Maple Archtop EB-2, described in the Gibson catalog as a hollow-body electric bass that features a bass baritone push-button for two different tonal characteristics. In 1959, these were followed by the more conventional-looking EB-0 bass. The EB-0 was very similar to a Gibson SG in appearance, whereas Fender basses had pickups mounted in positions in between the base of the neck and the top of the bridge. Many of Gibson's early basses featured one humbucking pickup mounted directly against the neck pocket. The EB-3, introduced in 1961, also had a mini humbucker at the bridge position. Gibson basses also tended to be smaller, sleeker instruments. Gibson did not produce a 34-inch scale bass until 1963 with the release of the Thunderbird, which was also the first Gibson bass to use dual humbucking pickups in a more traditional position about halfway between the neck and bridge. A small number of other companies also began manufacturing bass guitars during the 1950s, Kay in 1952 and Dan Electro in 1956. 1956 saw the appearance at the German trade fair Musikmesse Frankfurt of the distinctive Hofner 500 Dover 1 violin bass made using violin construction techniques by Walter Hofner, a second-generation violin luthier. The instrument is often known as the Beatle bass, due to its endorsement and use by Paul McCartney. In 1957, Rickenbacker introduced the Model 4000 bass, the first bass to feature a neck-through body design. The Fender and Gibson versions used bolt-on and glued-on necks. 1960s. With the explosion of the popularity of rock music in the 1960s, many more manufacturers began making electric basses. First introduced in 1960, the Fender Jazz bass was known as the Deluxe bass and was meant to accompany the Jazz Master guitar. The Jazz bass featured two single-coil pickups, one close to the bridge and one in the precision bass split-coil pickup position. The earliest production basses had a stacked volume and tone control for each pickup. This was soon changed to the familiar configuration of a volume control for each pickup and a single passive tone control. The Jazz bass neck was narrower at the nut than the precision bass, 1.5 inches versus 1 3/4 inch. Another visual difference that set the Jazz bass apart from the precision is its offset waist body. Pickup shapes on electric basses are often referred to as P or J pickups in reference to the visual and electrical differences between the precision bass and Jazz bass pickups. Fender also began production of the Mustang bass, a 30-inch scale-length instrument used by bassists such as Tina Weymouth of Talking Heads and Bill Wyman of the Rolling Stones. A design echoed on most current production electric basses of all makes. In the 1950s and 1960s, the instrument was often called the Fender bass, due to Fender's early dominance in the market. The Fender Vi, a baritone guitar, was tuned 1 octave lower than standard guitar tuning. It was released in 1961, and was favored by Jack Bruce of Cream. Gibson introduced the short-scale 30.5-inch EB-3 in 1961, also used by Jack Bruce. 1970s. The 1970s saw the founding of Music Man Instruments by Tom Walker, Forrest White and Leo Fender, which produced the Stingray, the first widely produced bass with active electronics. This amounts to an impedance buffering preamplifier on board the instrument to lower lower the output impedance of the bass pickup circuit, increasing low-end output and overall frequency response. Specific models became identified with particular styles of music, such as the Rickenbacker 4001 series, which became identified with progressive rock bassists like Chris Squire of Yes and Geddy Lee of Rush, while the Stingray was used by funk disco players such Louis Johnson of the funk band The Brothers Johnson and Bernie Edwards of She. In 1971, Alembic established the template for what became known as boutique or high-end electric bass guitars. These expensive, custom-tailored instruments, as used by Phil Lesh, Jack Cassidy, and Stanley Clarke, featured unique designs, premium hand-finished wood bodies, onboard electronics for preamplification and equalization, and innovative construction techniques such as multi-laminate neck-through body construction and graphite necks. In the mid-1970s, Alembic and other boutique bass manufacturers, such as Tobias, produced 4-string and 5-string basses with a low B string. In 1975, bassist Anthony Jackson commissioned luthier Carl Thompson to build a 6-string bass tuned BOE1A1, D2, G2, C3. 1980s. Present in the 1980s, bass designers continued to explore new approaches. Ned Steinberger introduced a headless bass in 1979 and continued his innovations in the 1980s, using graphite and other new materials and introducing the trem tremolo bar. In 1982, Hans-Peter Wilfer founded Warwick to make a European bass in contrast to the Asian and American basses. The first bass was a streamer bass, which is similar to the Spectre NS. In 1987, the Guild Guitar Corporation launched the fretless Ashbury bass, which used silicon rubber strings and a piezoelectric pickup to achieve a double bass sound with a short 18-inch scale length. In the late 1980s, MTV's Unplugged show, which featured bands performing with acoustic instruments, helped to popularize hollow-bodied acoustic bass guitars amplified with pickups. During the 1990s, as 5-string basses became more widely available and more affordable, an increasing number of bassists in genres ranging from metal to gospel began using 5-string instruments for added lower range, a low B, as well. Onboard battery-powered electronics such as preamplifiers and equalizer circuits, which were previously only available on expensive boutique instruments, became increasingly available on modestly priced basses. In the 2000s, some bass manufacturers included digital modeling circuits inside the instrument to recreate tones and sounds from many models of basses. Traditional bass designs such as the Fender Precision Bass and Fender Jazz Bass remained popular in the 2000s. In 2011, a 60th anniversary P-Bass was introduced by Fender, along with the reintroduction of the short-scale Fender Jaguar bass. Design considerations. Bass bodies are typically made of wood, although other materials such as graphite have also been used, while a wide variety of woods are suitable for use in the body, neck, and fretboard of the bass guitar. The most common type of wood used for the body are alder and ash, for the neck is maple, and for the fretboard is rosewood. Other commonly used woods include mahogany, maple, ash, walnut, and poplar for bodies, mahogany for necks, and maple and ebony for fretboards. Other design options include finishes, such as lacquer, wax and oil, flat and carved designs. Luthier produce custom-designed instruments, headless basses, which have tuning machines in the bridge of the instrument and several artificial materials such as luthite. The use of artificial materials allows for unique production techniques such as die-cast casting to produce complex body shapes. While most basses have solid bodies, they can also include hollow chambers to increase the resonance or reduce the weight of the instrument. Some basses are built with entirely hollow bodies, which change the tone and resonance of the instrument. Acoustic bass guitars have a hollow wooden body like an acoustic guitar, and are typically equipped with piezoelectric pickups and amplified. Instruments handmade by highly skilled luthiers are becoming increasingly available in the 2010s. Exotic materials used in high-end instruments include woods such as bubinga, wenge, ovankul, ebony and goncalo alves. Graphite composite is used to make lightweight necks. Exotic woods are used on more expensive instruments. For example, alembic uses cocobolo as a body or top layer material because of its attractive grain. Warwick bass guitars are also well known for exotic hardwoods. Most of the necks are made of ovankul, and the fingerboards use wenge or ebony. Solid bubinga bodies are also used for the tonal and aesthetic qualities. A common feature of more expensive basses is neck-through construction. Instead of milling the body from a single piece of wood and then attaching the neck into a pocket, neck-through basses are constructed first by assembling the neck, which may comprise 1, 3, 5 or more layers of wood in vertical stripes, which are longer than the length of the fretboard. To this elongated neck, the body is attached as two wings, which may also be made up of several layers. The entire bass is then milled and shaped. Some players believe neck-through construction provides better sustain and a mellower tone than bolt-on neck construction. While neck-through construction is most common in handmade boutique basses, some models of mass-produced bass such as Ibanez's BTB series also have neck-through construction. Bolt-on neck construction does not necessarily imply a cheaply made instrument. Virtually all traditional Fender designs still use bolt-on necks, including its high-end instruments costing thousands of dollars. Many boutique luthiers build bolt-on basses as well as neck-through instruments. The number of frets installed on a bass guitar neck may vary. The original Fender basses had 20 frets, and most bass guitars have between 20 and 24 frets or fret positions. Instruments with between 24 and 36 frets also exist. Instruments with more frets are used by bassists who play bass solos, as more frets gives them additional upper range notes. Like electric guitars, fretted basses typically have markers on the fingerboard and on the side of the neck to assist the player in determining where notes are. The markers indicate the 3rd, 5th, 7th, 9th fret and 12th fret, and on the octave up equivalents of the 3rd fret and as many additional positions as an instrument has frets for. Typically, one marker is used for the 3rd, 5th, 7th and 9th fret positions, and two markers are used for the 12th fret. The long scale necks on Leo Fender's basses, with a scale length of 34 inches, set the standard for electric basses, although 30-inch short-scale instruments, such as the Hofner 500/1 violin bass, played by Paul McCartney, and the Fender Mustang bass are also common, while 35-inch, 35.5-inch, and 36-inch scale lengths were once only available in boutique instruments in the 2000s. Many manufacturers began offering these extra-long scale lengths. This extra-long scale provides a higher string tension, which may yield a more defined tone on the low B string of 5- and 6-stringed instruments. Fretted and fretless basses. Another design consideration for the bass is whether to use frets on the fingerboard. fingerboard. On a fretted bass, the frets divide the fingerboard into semitone divisions. Fretless basses have a distinct sound, because the absence of frets means that the string must be pressed down directly onto the wood of the fingerboard. As with the double bass, the string buzzes against the wood and is somewhat muted because the sounding portion of the string is in direct contact with the flesh of the player's finger. The fretless bass allows players to use the expressive devices of glissando, vibrato and microtonal intonations such as quarter tones and just intonation. While fretless basses are often associated with jazz and jazz fusion, bassists from other genres have used fretless basses, such as Freeboo, Rick Danko, Rod Clements, Steve DiGiorgio and Colin Edwin. Some bassists alternate between fretted and fretless basses in performances, according to the type of material they are performing, e.g., Pino Palladino at Tony 11. The first fretless bass guitar was made by Bill Wyman in 1961 when he converted an inexpensive Japanese fretted bass by removing the frets. The first production fretless bass was the Ampeg Orb 1 introduced in 1966, and Fender introduced a fretless precision bass in 1970. Around 1970, Rick Danko from the band began to use an Ampeg fretless, which he modified with Fender pickups, as heard on the 1971 Cahoot studio album and the Rock of Ages album recorded live in 1971. Danko said, "It's a challenge to play fretless because you have to really use your ear." In the early 1970s, fusion jazz bassist Jaco Pastorius created his own fretless bass by removing the frets from a Fender jazz bass, filling the holes with wood putty, and coating the fretboard with epoxy resin. Some fretless basses have fretline markers inlaid in the fingerboard as a guide, while others only use guide marks on the side of the neck. Tape-wound and flat-wound strings are sometimes used with the fretless bass so the metal string windings do not wear down the fingerboard. Some fretless basses have epoxy-coated fingerboards to increase the fingerboard's durability, enhance sustain, and give a brighter tone. Strings and tuning. The standard design for the electric bass guitar has 4 strings, tuned D, A, D and G, in fourth such that the open higher string, G, is an 11th below middle C, making the tuning of all 4 strings the same as that of the double bass. This tuning is also the same as the standard tuning on the lower 4 strings on a 6-string guitar, only an octave lower. String types include all metal strings, as well as metal strings with different coverings, such as tape-wound and plastic coatings. The variety of materials used in the strings gives bass players a range of tonal options. In the 1950s and early 1960s, bassists mostly used flat-wound strings with a smooth surface, which had a smooth, damped sound reminiscent of a double bass. In the late 1960s and 1970s, round-wound bass strings similar to guitar strings became popular, though flat-wounds also remain popular. Round-wounds have a brighter timbre with longer sustain than flat-wounds. A variety of tuning options and number of string courses have been used to extend the range of the instrument, or facilitate different modes of playing. The most common are 4, 5, or 6 strings. 4 strings with alternative tunings to obtain an extended lower range. Tuning in 5th C, G, C, G, D, A gives an extended upper and lower range. 5 strings usually tuned BOE 1, A 1, D 2, G 2, which provides extended lower range. Another common tuning used on early 5-string basses is the ADGC, known as tenor tuning. This is still a popular tuning for jazz and solo bass. Other tunings such as CEADG are used in rare cases. The fifth string provides a greater lower range or a greater upper range than the four-string bass, and gives access to more notes for any given hand position. The earliest five-string was created by Fender in 1965. The Fender Bass V used the EADGC tuning, but was unpopular and discontinued in 1970. The common low B5 string was created by Jimmy Johnson as a custom instrument in 1975. He bought an EADGC 5-string alembic bass, replaced the nut, and used a new, thick low B string from GHS to accommodate the instrument accordingly. Steinberger made a 5-string headless instrument called the L-2/5 in 1982, and later Yamaha offered the first production model as the BB5000 in 1984. 6 strings are usually tuned BOE1A1D to G2C3, like a 4-string bass with an additional low B string and a high C string. Some players prefer BOE1A1D to F#2B2, which preserves the intervals of standard guitar tuning and makes the highest and lowest string the same note 2 octaves apart. While less common than 4 or 5-string basses, they appear in Latin, jazz, and other genres, as well as in studio work where a single instrument must be highly versatile. Alternative tunings for 6-string bass include BEADGB, matching the first 5 strings of an acoustic or electric guitar, and EADGBE, completely matching the tuning of a 6-string guitar but 1 octave lower, allowing the use of guitar chord fingerings. Rarer tunings such as EADGCF and F#BEADG provide a lower or higher range in a given position while maintaining consistent string intervals. The original 6-string bass was the Longhorn 6, created by Dan Electro in 1958, as a guitar tuned down an octave. In 1974, Anthony Jackson worked with Carl Thompson to create the contrabass guitar. Later, Jackson brought his ideas to Fodera in cooperation with Ken Smith to create a wider-spaced contrabass guitar, which evolved to the modern 6-string bass. 8 and 12-string models are both built on the same coarse string concept found on 12-string guitars, where sets of strings are spaced together in groups of 2 or 3 that are primarily played simultaneously. These instruments typically have one of the strings in each course tuned an octave above the standard string, although a fifth above is also used. Instruments with 10 and 15 strings, grouped in 5 courses, also exist. Detuners, such as the hip shot, are mechanical devices the player operates with the thumb on the fretting to quickly retune one or more strings to a preset lower pitch. Hip shots typically drop the E string down to D on a 4-string bass. Alternative range approaches. Some bassists use other types of tuning to extend the range or get other benefits, such as providing multiple octaves of notes at any given position, or a larger tonal range. Instrument types or tunings used for this purpose include basses with fewer than 4 strings and alternative tunings e.g. tenor bass. Extended range basses are basses with 6 to 12 strings, with the additional strings used for range rather than unison or octave pairs. A 7-string bass was built by luthier Michael Tobias in 1987. This instrument, commissioned by bassist Gary Goodman, was an early example of a bass with more than 6 single coarse strings. In 1999, South American herb player Igor Saavedra designed one of the first 8-string ERBs known, and asked luthier Alfonso Itara to build it for him. Conklin builds custom herb basses. The guitar bass is a 10-string instrument with 4 bass strings and 6 guitar strings. Luthier Michael Adler built the first 11-string bass in 2004 and completed the first single-course 12-string bass in 2005. Adler's 11 and 12-string instruments have the same range as a grand piano. Sub-contrabasses such as C-sharp, F-sharp, B-E have been created. Ibanez had released SR7 VIISC in 2009, featuring a 30-inch scale and narrower width, and tuned as BEADGCE. The company dubbed it a cross between bass and guitar. In 2011, Warwick released a new Thumb NT7 bass for Jero and Paul Thesseling, featuring a 34-inch scale with sub-contra tuning F-sharp BEADGC. Eve Carbon developed 10 and 12-string fretless sub-bass guitars. Piccolo basses are cosmetically similar to a 4-stringed electric bass guitar, but usually tuned one whole octave higher than a normal bass. The first electric piccolo bass was constructed by luthier Carl Thompson for Stanley Clarke. To allow for the raised tuning, the strings will be thinner, and the length of the neck may be shorter. Several companies manufacture piccolo sets that can be put on any regular bass, thereby converting any bass into a piccolo bass. Because of the thinner strings, a new nut may be required to hold the strings. Some people prefer a slightly shorter scale, such as 30 inches or 28 inches. The tuning varies with the personal tastes of the artist, as does the number of strings. Joey DeMaio from the heavy metal band Manowar plays with 4 strings on his piccolo bass. Jazz bassist John Patitucci used a 6-string piccolo bass, unaccompanied, on his song Saatchi's Eyes on his album One More Angel. Michael Manring has used a 5-string piccolo bass in several altered tunings. Michael uses D'Addario EXL 280 piccolo bass strings on his 4-string hyperbass, made by Zon Guitars.